Hi, my name is Fred Forsburg. Our farm, my wife's in the back. We farm in Livonia, New York, which is in Finger Lakes, the westernmost Finger Lake, about 25 miles south of Buffalo, or Rochester. This is school, huh? Did you say this was a pointer also?
Yes,
okay, great. Garlic, heirloom tomatoes, pasture-raised chickens, grass-fed beef. We have 5 high tunnels. We started late in life. This is our 10th year. I want to do it all, so it's fun when you see that broad spectrum of products.
Pointed at the computer.
It worked. Well, I said like you, I'm a grower, but I guess there's some researchers here too. So this is, I looked at the research yesterday and it scared me. I said, gee, all these great researchers here speaking a different language than I generally speak. But, this is about experience. Garlic is our principal crop. It's an expensive crop. It's a very valuable crop. I know the first year when we there's no clock in this room, is there?
You have 20 minutes left.
Okay. First year, you know, with a lot of snickering in the neighborhood because, now this guy's growing garlic. He's got a 1/4 acre garlic out there. And, well, at harvest time, we got a little more respect, and they found out it's worth 100 times more than corn on an acre basis. So, and that was a bad year for corn and a good year for garlic. It is also a great fit for small, sustainable organic growers because it's a size-neutral crop. There are not equipment to make it an unequal between a large and small grower. Generally, you know, there are some planters, but they don't really work with very well with large partner garlic. Unfortunately, the biggest problem is labor. The most difficult thing to do is plant garlic. It's extremely painful if you have 3 or 4 miles like we do of rows. And actually, I have a poster at the same time. My poster's downstairs with regard to the planting machine. But we're talking about weeds here. It's a poor competitor against weeds, and it's guaranteed poor result if you don't keep up with weed control. And what I was doing, this is my first year. Actually, we planted our first garlic in 2002. And a friend of mine says, Fred, go get the research. She's Tom, I'm a software engineer. I didn't say that yet. I was a software engineer for 30 years. I started in farming. First with garlic in 2002. And my buddy Tom says, go get the money, get the research money. I said, what are you talking about? I'm a software engineer. He says, oh, you're a farmer. I says, all right. I went out and I found SARE. I never heard of SARE prior to that. So I was out just Googling around, and I found this research at the Beltsville Agricultural Research Center in Maryland, and it had to do with vinegar as a herbicide. I was thinking, geez, you know, this crop of garlic we got in the ground, it was only a 1/4 acre. It cost, I don't know, it's worth $4,000 there. Can I spray vinegar? Can I risk spraying vinegar on my biggest crop and killing it all? But I remembered something that a buddy of mine told me. He was one of my advisors, Dave Stern of the Garlic Seed Foundation, and one of the founders of NOFA, it turns out. He said, the waxy nature of garlic, and I don't know why, but that's stuck in my mind for a decade. And I thought, well, gee, maybe this will cause it to run off, the vinegar to run off. And I said, well, I wrote my grant, it was accepted. So I apologize for some of my slides. I just went to a Mac and I can't figure out how to use that online thing. Then it transferred over to a PC and it doesn't look right, but all the information is there. So vinegar, the first decision I had to make was what kind of vinegar to use. Was it salad pickle or industrial basic, but 5, 10, or 20% and up. Industrial vinegar is very costly. It will burn your eyes out 20%. I was concerned with 5%, however, your standard household vinegar that it would be strong enough. Now Beltsville research showed that it was effective against some weeds, but not all weeds. So I talked to a friend of mine who's a commercial chemist, and he said not to worry about 10%. But Beltsville does say over 11%, it could cause corneal damage. I thought that was inappropriate to use in this application, so I selected 10%. My advisors were David Stern again, Dr. Andrew Landers at Cornell, who is a spraying expert, and Robin Belinder, who is a Professor Belinder, who is a lead scientist. All three of them were at my farm. The objective was the basally directed spray for in-row weed control. Clearly, it's simple with either manual or tractor-mounted equipment to do between-row cultivation of garlic. The in-row is the difficult thing, because you got these things planted 4 inches apart, and even a quarter acre took 9 hours. I mean, you want to use a small hoe. This stuff is valuable. You don't want to go clipping some of your garlic. So that was the design. The design is, we had 14 rows of 250 feet long. Now, this was already planted, by the way, before I even got this research. I designed one as a sacrificial row where I could literally saturate the garlic to test whether in fact it did harm the garlic. And one was a border. That allowed me, that left 12 rows, which I divided equally into 4 blocks, each block with 2 plots, tested and controlled. Now remember, all the between row was mechanical. In the control row it was mechanical, and in the test row I sprayed vinegar. Every time I sprayed vinegar, I mechanically cultivated the garlic in the control plot. This was the layout. The red flags were there. They were actually farther apart. Andy Landers laid it out 100 feet, and I sprayed, and I walked several times through there, and he timed my travel speed, and it turned out to be 2 miles per hour, which was right in the center of the ideal travel speed. This is the typical machine you use for mechanical cultivation. It's probably older than most people in this room. It's a 1952 Alice Chalmers Model CA. And what does Tom Sawyer have to do with that? Well, I have a neighbor who, he's a sort of frustrated farm boy, and I've convinced him it's a good thing that he cultivate my garlic. And one day he showed up with he says, I want to put something on your tractor. And he said, what is it, Joe? He brings out of his trunk a beach what happened to that? A beach umbrella and a roll of duct tape. And I said, I don't care what you do, Joe, just don't hurt the tractor. So all we saw all day long was we only see this umbrella fun through the field. It's great fun. Anyway, the goal in spraying is the uniform deposition material in the product. I see so many farmers spraying caustic chemicals, toxic chemicals, and I've talked to them, and they really had no idea about it. Really what you're doing is you want to create a uniform droplet or appropriate size droplet and apply it uniformly. And I haven't talked to anybody yet that knows that. And that's troubling because, you know, a lot of the stuff is pretty toxic they're spraying around, and many times it's not effective. The first thing you have to do is determine the droplet size. And Dr. Landers helped me do that by he opened the TJET catalog, which is a standard catalog of who would have thunk of 200,000 nozzles. I mean, it's an amazing thing. We selected a nozzle based on, for herbicide, if it was a liquid, etc., and it would form a uniform or a medium-sized droplet. But the problem is, when you're using equipment, in my case I was using a solo backpack sprayer, its pressure would vary between 0 and 90 psi. A droplet size is a function of nozzle flow rate and pressure. So you're going all the way from, you know, actually, my wife was following behind me this day, the sun was out. She said this stuff is flying all over the place. When I got to the top of the range pumping this doggone thing, tiny little droplets in there, I could taste them, they were in my eyes, and it stung. And the large droplets will hit the leaf surface and bounce off. So you have to get that just the right size. So you have to control the pressure. How do you do that? A little device here. Well, I should say before I get there, this is out of the TJET catalog. I don't know if you can see its pressure and flow rate, and right here's the optimum range. And you're also, you know, if you're working with something pumping this like this, you ruin your arm after 3 miles. I tell you, you ruin your arm before you get to 1 mile. You don't want to be pumping way out and throwing the stuff all over, just overworking yourself. The solution, however, was this ingenious little device called a control flow valve. Right there it is. It weighs less than about a half an ounce. It's 2 inches long. And you simply attach it to your wand. It is effective, plus or minus 1.5%, staying within that range. It's a 21.5, 1.5 bar, 21.5 psi, 1.5 bar pressure. Now the next thing is, I talked about travel speed. If you maintain that travel speed, you're going to get uniform deposition on the product. Now, how do you do that? How do you know when you're doing that out? When you're walking, you know, you're walking this thing, your back walking away. Find a rock. Every once in a while, I see a rock coming up, and watch it as that spray hits it, and you should see a uniform deposition, and it works perfectly.
10 minutes.
This is the initial application on row 1. This was after 30 minutes. Now, I liberally douse this. I don't know if you can see it, but there is some damage on the leaves here. That was 30 minutes later. It turned out that it healed itself. It didn't harm the garlic at all. That's the droplet pattern on the garlic, on that first row. You see, it's pretty uniform, but they're also starting to coalesce, which I hoped they would, and they're starting to run off. Acetic acid kills, well, so I had this 10% acetic acid vinegar. The method of kill is it strips the top surface of the leaf, leaving it open for desiccation in the sun. Unfortunately, that year, it was 2003. It was like 2003, just occurred to me, it was like 2010 in our area. It was cool, it was damp, it rained almost every day. The effect on some plants weren't as pronounced as it would be on a warmer day, especially with sunshine. However, I'll get to that in a minute. The waxy nature of the garlic protected at least the garlic. We commenced applications on May the 10th and did 5 applications. The assessment was 100% effectiveness against broadleaf weeds. I have them all in my report. I didn't put them here in this document, but it is online. Grasses were minimal control. Quiet grass, I doused a particular plant that was next to my sacrificial row over and over again, and just laughed at me. That's the bane of our farm. There were a variety of other grasses in their seedling stages that were controlled. But then in many grasses, they can come back and you're just killing the top growth. You notice this is after 1 week after the first application. First application again was May 10th. See, the lower leaves of the garlic were harmed, but they turned green again. But all of the broadleaves in here, right in row, are dead or dying. In fact, I think all are dead. But you can see some of the grasses here, they survived. Just another shot. I had a drift guard on there. We determined later that it was unnecessary because it didn't hurt the garlic. You can see this is later on in the year also. No broadleaves at all in that row. Apparently that maybe I'm adjacent to a control plot for this. I see broadleaves there.
Your drift guard, that's a physical barrier?
I'm sorry?
What was your drift guard?
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, it's right here. It's
Oh, okay.
right there. I wanted to ensure that none of the spray got on the garlic leaves. So I was running low, but by this time I had realized it wasn't necessary. That I didn't need the drift guard, but I left it on anyway. It was easier for me to control to see where I was targeting. In this field, this was a really lush, as you can see, explosion of field pennycress. It's not really it's really yellow. I don't know. Maybe that makes the color the whole thing seem yellow, but it was it's very profuse, as you can see in that field. And I want you to pay attention to that tree behind you, because you're going to think this is trick photography. 4 hours later. I thought my neighbors were going to blow me into know that I was using Roundup. That was that was the first amazing thing that I saw. Now maybe that's a plant that's extraordinarily susceptible to the acetic acid, but that was the general effect on most plants. I also found that this is a general burn down herbicide in most plants. Now, burdock like this, don't expect that effect on older leaves. But you can see these are pretty good size. They're 1.5 foot long at least. When they're fast growing and immature, they're still tender. That was only 2 hours, by the way. The other one's Canada thistle. This stuff is deadly to both Canada and bull thistle. And a lot of people that have horses that don't want to be using herbicides have problems with thistle. I've told them to use vinegar and very successfully. I spot treat my pastures with vinegar. Finally, weather was a factor. As I said previously, I found out later, a couple of years later, in 2006, I found a bunch of broadleaves in my lawn around the house. I went out and sprayed them, and I was surprised I killed the grass in that area. The thing is, the grass bounced back within a week, but I did control the broadleaf weeds. Economics. A barrel of vinegar, now I'm buying vinegar in 55-gallon drums. At that time it was $122. I believe it's up around $150 right now. Actually, the cost of transportation is much greater than the cost of vinegar because a drum of vinegar is 565 pounds. And it's also difficult, obviously, to manhandle. You need some kind of equipment to handle that. Okay, on the other hand, if one would damage 1/4 of 1% of the garlic in any of those 5 cultivations, you would have lost more than the value of the vinegar. Meaning vinegar's free. Why would you want to manually inrow weed garlic if you can do it without harming your plants? I mean, harming the bulbs. Seed garlic sells for $8 to $10 a pound. That means each bulb is worth $2. Thank you. So, 2 things. Don't do anything without getting weeds in the Northeast out of Cornell. And Robin Blender had a grad student who took up this project, got his master's degree on it. This is what I got for that. This was given to Glenn. I never met Glenn Evans, but the Measures Cornell people here know him. He also got his PhD based path on this, so that was a lot of fun to hear.
So we can take a couple of questions in between talks before people. How long do you want? Sure. Any kind of spread or sticker? Just repeat what.
No,
Can you repeat the question?
Was there any sticker? I didn't know about adjuvants before then, and we actually didn't use. We didn't need any. As it turns out, I suspect it might be more effective.
You use new film P. You would try to get better deposition.
New film P.
New film P.
It's no longer approved for organic production.
What about that?
It's no longer approved.
No longer?
It was for years. This is kind of the standard. They dropped it off.
Just what happened? Is it 17? New film 17?
Yeah,
17 or
17
something?
P.
Well, there's 17 is not allowed. But
Yeah.
New film P.
P was for a long time, but
We'll check the certification status of your adjuvants.
Yeah, there's different rules in Maine.
Another issue with regard to rules. You said you were buying vinegar. Was that the household food grade at the end there, or is that?
No, I was purchasing 10% CD.
So you're going to have an issue in some states of regulatory issues. Pesticide application, if it's not an exempt, if it's not a food grade material exempt from tolerance, you cannot use it if it does not have a pesticide label.
Omri approved it.
Separate issue. So just take note to consult your state regulatory authorities before you.
Oh, that's insane.
Now, one interesting thing, if you want to try this and you need more than a barrel of vinegar, it would be more appropriate by 20%. and cut it with water because
Yeah,
you only have to ship after that.
you're gonna get in trouble. We've had people in trouble for very mundane materials without labels, which isn't to say you could request a special use or something like that.
Fred, you said you used 5 applications. How far apart were they?
Oh boy, I can't tell you. I can show you my report. I don't.
Like a couple of weeks apart, or?
Well, I started on May the 10th and I ended the first week of June. They were probably,
Oh, pretty close.
yeah. I think I did it more based on weed pressure.
Okay. But you saw collapse of weeds rather rapidly.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you saw how fast it these things. Yes, look.
What's the downside of mulching with straw and in row and out row?
Well, I never like. Well, first when you're doing it on an acre basis, we're up to 2 acres now. You know, that's almost, I'd say, impossible unless you have equipment to do that. I had a bad experience with mulching, so I probably not. Well, actually, a couple of bad experiences. I bought from my neighbor was full of weeds. It was the worst weeds I've ever had in my garden. It was just the opposite of what I expected. I mean, they were literally up to here. It was terrible.
We find that we have to take the mulch off in the spring until the garlic comes up, and then we can put it
The
back.
soil stays good for a while. I leave it alone.
So,
I was just wondering, where'd you buy the vinegar?
That's a good question. It turns out, I bought it from Fleischmann's Vinegar, and it turns out that it's in Rose, New York, a mile from Dave Stern's house, as a matter of fact, but that's about 40 miles from us. But it really doesn't make any difference if it's shipped by tractor trailer. Because the greater the distance, the greater the cost. You know, in a 565 pounds, you gotta have the right equipment to handle it. Yes?
So that little control valve, you said that came from T-Jet?
It comes from a company called Gate Technologies, but you can buy it. I noticed it's in Hudson catalog, it's in Solo catalog. At the time,
You can get them sized right to the threads on the Solo.
but, you know, you have to. They come with a whole variety of different pressures, and I had the red one, which is the 21.5 psi. They also come with, I think, 6 different thread sizes.
So this is a segue to a comment I wanted to make. You know, it's great to see all these SARE projects and farmer grants especially. Of course, we have other types of grants, research and education partnership. Before you do anything with a backpack sprayer, you should go see the SARE project that John Grande at the Snyder Research Farm at Rutgers did. I'm trying to remember if that was a PDP, I think it was a Professional Development Grant for Training Extension Educators. That guy knows backpack sprayers top to bottom and can completely lay out. Essentially, most of the units you buy are inappropriate. They don't work well, they don't maintain pressures. There are a few brands that take less pumps for more pressures. He just gave a great talk at the New England meeting. One thing he said, the first thing they do with any backpack sprayer is they cut off the wand, throw it away. And then they go to T-Jet and they build their own effective system with the right pressure, with the regulator, with the shut-off valve. So he's got all that stuff online, and it's a real eye-opener to realize everyone's running around with these sprayers that aren't working properly.
Yeah.
They're too much work, they're not dispersing the right amount of material, and they're not maintaining pressure.
They all come with those cheesy conical nozzles that just waste the
So
tremendous
they do everything, they convert everything to these quick release, so you can just snap in and out the nozzles without screwing things on and off, and it's all color coded. It was a real eye-opener to see how much improvement they got for a very modest investment, and also to start with the right sprayer. The one, you know, there's like
John Grande.
Yeah.
John
What's his
Grande,
name?
Snyder Research Station, Rutgers Experiment Station. You could email him, and he'll, I'm sure he'll be happy to give you a lot of info.